Welcome into Sikkim365.com. I'm here once again joined by Ashley Hodge, and we are going to continue going through each and every Baylor basketball player this offseason that Baylor's added today. We're talking about Tennessee transfer Carr, who actually joined this Baylor team during the middle of the season, got to practice and be around the team. So he's close to a returner, but not quite. But a guy who definitely very interested in. He played a few games at Tennessee before sitting out the season due to an injury, and then, of course, transferring to Baylor. Ashley, I know when this happened, it kind of felt like it happened out of nowhere, but he ends up, transferring midseason from a really good Vols team to Baylor. Pretty abrupt and kind of in the very middle of the season.
Yeah, and you could tell by the comments from Rick Barnes, they were not happy to see him go at all. But it's Baylor's gain. I think he's a terrific prospect. I think he's a guy with a tremendous amount of potential. Played with Jacoby Walter at Link Academy. And I remember watching that game where they won the Geico Nationals. I think it was Sunrise Christian, maybe against Merrill Little, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe I'm getting my teams mixed up, but I think it was Merrill Little on that Sunrise team. And I just remember Carr went off in that game. He had 18 points, shot the ball from three really well. That was a big game. Jacoby also had a really big game. So I think Baylor's getting a guy with really high upside, almost like your perfect 3-and-D player, 6'5", 7'2" wingspan. He can hit threes. He's got the ability to slash. He can convert, alley-oops. He could be a great defender with that long wingspan. I think the question for me would be, he's not the most physically imposing guy. He's not built like the guys we've been talking about recently, Skillings and Tunde Yesufu. So just toughness. Will he be able to, really give Baylor what they need from an effort and toughness standpoint? I think he will, but those are the question marks on him.
Definitely. I think this is the prospect who people just kind of forgot about when Baylor was going through the transfer portal process, just kind of wondering what the roster was going to look like and completely forgetting that Carr had kind of been there all along, right? As a guy who they expected to play a big role. And he's kind of the perfect fit for what a lot of Baylor fans have been kind of screaming for is continuity. Well, he fits that bill because he's got multiple years of eligibility. He's been in the program for a little bit. So he again is one who I fully expect to be back next year as well and probably be in a much bigger role, even though I expect him to play a pretty big role this year for this team. But former 4-star prospect, the college stats, just there aren't very many of them, so it's hard to get much of a takeaway from it. But I think the biggest thing for me when I watch his film and when I kind of saw what he did in high school, he's got really good range. He can really shoot the three-point shot. And the range especially. He does not have to be right on the three-point line to knock down jump shots. He can hit NBA threes, and that's going to stretch the defense. And then you mentioned his size. I mean, 6'5", 7'2" wingspan, really long. One of the first videos when you look up YouTube, it's like comparing him to Reggie Miller, which I find kind of, it's funny to think about, but right. But if he did turn into that, man, that would be a heck of a player. But the jump shot, the athleticism, the length, I think those type of things are really intriguing. And I think the fact that he transferred from Tennessee is also a big deal. Tennessee is a really good program and a culture there that is very focused on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no question about that. I think, we look at last year's team, not to compare apples to oranges, but one of the disappointing things about last year's team, outside of VJ Edgecombe, is I just thought we just didn't have wing players that were very athletic. I won't name names, but we weren't very athletic on the wing. This year, it's like a 180 because you got Cameron Carr, you got Dan Skillings, you got Tunde Yesufu, you got Michael Ratai. I mean, we got a lot of athleticism on the wings. And, I think that's going to be a key thing. Obi Agbem is a longer guard, 6'8" wingspan. So, when you factor in those three guys or five guys actually, and how athletic they are, that's going to be a dramatic difference from last year with what we're going to be able to do, not only defensively, but offensively as well. Just allows for much more, slashing and, alley-oops at the rim. just the ability to really take advantage of our athleticism in space. And that's something that this past year's team really struggled with.
It did. And once again, that also impacts transition. That also impacts ability to get to the free throw line, which Baylor could just not get to the free throw line at all, except for VJ. I think with Cameron, when I look at kind of some of the things that maybe he needs to, it's hard to even say work on because we frankly haven't seen enough of him. But the things that I see that maybe could be a problem for him are ball handling, playmaking, like creation for others, are the two areas, right? Because right now I do view him more as a catch and shoot guy or a catch and attack guy, not so much a primary ball handler, a primary creator for an offense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've got to reach out to him to try to schedule an interview. I think, Sikkim 365 premium members will get more of a feel for his personality, but, he seems like a pretty chill guy. Like he's, the competitive fire would be my question. And that's a grade of incomplete. I just haven't seen enough of him to really make a judgment there. He certainly showed glimpses like the Geico Nationals where he had that competitive fire. Mm-hmm. And I know, Tennessee's not recruiting you if they don't see the potential to be a dog. I mean, they're going defense first all the time. So I think, there's the potential is definitely there, but that's my main question is, does his motor really burn hot, and can he give you that, reach down deep and use his athleticism, but just relentlessness. That's the one thing, Maceo Teague is a guy that he's, maybe got a similar build to Maceo Teague, long wingspan, couple inches taller, couple inches longer than Maceo. And Maceo wasn't, like just a huge guy from a weightlifting standpoint, but his endurance, like his ability to play hard for 40 minutes was just almost unrivaled. Like he was always better at the end of games because of that endurance. And I'd love to see that from like a guy like Cam. If he has that kind of skill, sometimes you can make up for not having a physically imposing body if you just have that, like just the relentlessness to play hard until the last whistle. And, Maceo Teague would be a good guy for him to model his game after.
And I think just kind of bouncing off that, one thing Maceo Teague also did just extremely well was even when he wasn't shooting the ball well, he still was having that relentlessness, because a lot of guys, you start missing shots and then you start getting your head down. You're not as engaged on the defensive end. And Maceo, he didn't necessarily have the athleticism to be a great defender, but because of how hard he worked, how hard he focused, just his kind of feel for the game, it allowed him to get tips. It allowed him to get steals. It allowed him to put his body in a position to play good team defense. And so, can Cameron Carr do that when he's not knocking down a bunch of jump shots? Can he come in and give you, 15 minutes of him going 0 for 3, but him still having an impact on the game? That's going to be a question. And for a young guy, I think, frankly, that's always a question for guys along those lines. So expectations for Cameron Carr going into this year, where do you see him fitting into Baylor's roster?
Well, he's going to be the veteran in the locker room. He's going to be the only guy that knows where the locker room is and and what the routines are, because he's been through at least a semester of that. So when everybody shows up in June, he's going to be probably showing guys around and telling them what to do. But I mean, in all seriousness, I think he's going to be, one of the top 8 players for sure. Whether he comes off the bench, whether he ends up starting, who knows? But, he's a guy that, should be a great piece of a good NCAA team, hopefully a team that can make a deep run in March, because he just is so versatile. He's one of those guys that can guard 4 positions, 1 through 4 with his length and his size. And, I think he's going to give you 3-point shooting. Hopefully he's going to be one of the better defenders on the roster. That's my expectation is he's almost like the perfect 3-and-D player. Hopefully he'll turn into more, but if that's his floor, then that's a pretty hot floor.
I mean, if the defense is that good to start calling him a 3-and-D player, then that's going to be really exciting. Yeah, I kind of think he's probably going to play like 20 minutes a game, maybe 25, maybe a little bit more than that, and be your backup 2 or 3. Again, I don't think he's a point guard. I think he's going to have to play a wing spot, and I think he can be very productive there, and also give you games where he comes in off the bench and gives you 15 points in a hurry, and gives you that 3-point shooting. I think that's really important. I feel like at times last year, Baylor didn't have enough options for guys who could come in and just heat up and get on fire. And part of that was injuries. Part of that was guys just not playing up to the level of that they were expected to. So I'm curious if Carr can bring that to the table, especially as someone who I do believe will come off the bench.
Yep.
So that's it for Cameron Carr. Ashley and I will be back again tomorrow to talk more of this Baylor roster. It's been fun, but we're going to keep this thing going. Thanks for listening.